Hello, and welcome to another review video. Apologies for the delay, but I was a bit preoccupied with some other stuff. This time around, I'll be looking at the returning seasonal New Year's. The units are split into two REMs with almost identical lineups. The 5 Magic Stone REM has almost all New Year units. Only 2 4-stars are missing from the lineup, but you can get them from the multiple rewards. Unfortunately, you have to do multis on the 7 Magic Stone REM to even get a chance for those. But I really don't think this is worth it, as Tengu and the Arc are very underwhelming and can't even be used as straight fodder. The 7 Magic Stone REM has the same lineup as the 5 Magic Stone one, but excludes a few units and increases the rates for the others. And when I say a few, I only mean 3 units, which happen to be all of the 5 stars. Also, the rate increase for the higher rarity units in the 7 stone machine is very marginal. For example, the BGMs jump from 1% in the 5 Magic Stone REM to 1.2% in the 7 Magic Stone REM. Therefore, I feel like pulling the 7 stone machine is a bit of a scam. These rates are atrocious, and most of the older units barely have any use. So even by cutting off the 4 and 5 star units, you are not making the machine all that better. The reason why Gung-Ho made it a 7 Magic Stone REM instead of 6 Magic Stones, like they've done for Pad Island or for Pad Academy, is to give the non-bundle mid-rarities 8 latent slots, since all units that come from REMs that cost at least 7 Magic Stones all have 8 latent slots. Gung-Ho recently buffed all the high rarities in seasonals to have 8 latent slots. But some mid-rarities, even new ones like Halloween Melorum, only have 6 slots since they were not featured in a 7 stone machine. I'm sure people have complained about this, and this is Gung-Ho's solution. Make a 7 stone REM so that all the units there can get 8 latent slots. I feel like Gung-Ho should just buff all the mid-rarity seasonals to have 8 latent slots, because 7 Magic Stones for this type of REM feels like a scam. So I would not look at rolling in the 7 Magic Stone REM, as most of the units are not worth it. Maybe if more units were excluded and the rates for the higher rarities were significantly higher, then maybe I would feel differently. But I see most units in the seasonal as straight fodder. If you are going to roll at all, you might as well go with the 5 Magic Stone REM. I wouldn't have any high expectations though, as again, you'll be getting a lot of garbage. So go into the REM with that in mind. And if you see no value in the new exchangeable units like Albrecht, I would just skip the seasonal altogether. I'll take a brief look at some of the New Year units, mainly those that are new or those that I think are somewhat valuable. That is not to say that all of the other units are completely useless, as I'm sure you could use them somewhere, but I wouldn't spend Magic Stones going after them. Before moving on to the REM units, I'll look at some of the New Year Farmables. Now that Sync Awakenings are a thing, you might want to pick up Himiko and other dungeon drops, as these are requirements for Sync Awakenings for Aiden, Skull, Menuit, Waratsumi and Yamatsumi, and Mashiro. The other notable farmable is New Year Norris, who is a great swiping unit that you can use to farm a bunch of content like Alt UN2, which Shiba Dragon is unable to tackle. The grind for Norris gems, Anya Takarasu, will be long, but if you have no other swiping systems, like Lumiel or Binoa, then Norris might be a worthwhile system to get. Last year, I farmed at least 9 copies for each of my accounts, so that I can have different latents and awakenings on each Norris. This unit can make good use of the attribute or the damage absorption void latents, and if you want to be a bit faster when farming, then you can also opt to not fully awaken Norris so that you don't get combo orb animations. It's up to you how much of your resources and time you want to devote for farming for this unit, but I still think New Year Norris is worth the grind this time around. Okay, now onto the REM units. Let me know if I overlooked anyone, though I think even some of these units don't have much value in today's meta. And if you enjoyed the video, please remember to like and subscribe. Aramis and Kami Musubi are exchangeable 8 stars with some possible uses. Kami is still a decent Shiba Dra leader or sub, but this farming system has had some fierce competition from other swipe leaders like New Year Norris, who happens to be farmable and can clear more content than Shiba Dragon. So if you have that unit, for Valentine Noah or Namiel, you might not have that much use for New Year Kami. Aramis is not a full cleric on either of her forms, but both are decent subs for wood teams. Evo Aramis has a very unique active skill, and even if it's not a full cleric, it's still a very low cooldown piercer, attribute absorption voider, and a walking bind clearer. These 2 units might have pretty niche uses, but these could be worthwhile trades. Out of these two, I would prioritize RMS, since at least in the last year, I do remember actually using her in a New Year Norris team, and I honestly can't remember the last time I used New Year Kami. Reach and Waratsumi and Yamatsumi are also exchangeable, though these require different fodder. Both deal with attribute and damage absorption shields, but I don't see much value in exchanging for these units this time around. Reach is interesting because you could eventually overcharge some equips if you constantly match Rainbow. One example I vaguely remember is her having a gravity equip to deal with Cockrax in UN6. But Reach won't be able to provide much value at the start of a dungeon, and the 7-turn effect on essentially an 8-turn cooldown is kind of overkill most of the time. Her equips are solid, but the active skills don't really offer much value. Her Evo has a team-wide cap break active skill, but the first stage doesn't provide much value as it doesn't give any effective skill boosts. Gonho has started and will be releasing more cap breakers that loop their effect, so Reach right now doesn't stand out much, and she will even less very soon. Nier Waratsumi had some use last year as a pairing for Mashiro, but at the moment he doesn't really have a home. At best, he can be a decent damage tech in a water BDP team. His equip is decent, since it has a 10C and a lot of OE awakenings, but I don't think this alone warrant exchanging away 50 New Year units. I would rather look at the other units that take almost all New Year fodder, since those will have a little more use in today's meta. These exchangeable 9-stars don't really have much value nowadays. That more so goes for Lajoa. His brush was one of the best equips that add bulk and have a tape resist, but the active skill was and is still pretty useless. You might also have other options that have similar awakenings, like Darminakas, Dakis, or Melikas equips for example, but these are not as accessible as Lajoa. Their Dark Evo is a decent BDP damage tech and the active skill now unlocks. So now he's a decent orb generator, since you don't have to worry about being unable to activate your leader skill damage reduction. But Dark does have a lot of support, and this attribute is not short on orb generators like Arc Bursa, Accelerator, and Bad Maru, so I doubt that there's much demand for Lajoa. Lucina can be a good absorption voider that also comes with utility. A 5-turn cooldown on an effect that lasts for 2 turns is on the shorter end for non-transforming units, and the RCB boost can be very handy in dungeons that has multiple recovery debuffs. Her Harp has very solid awakenings and 6 effective skill boosts, while her card equip adds a lot of bulk with a lot of OEs, though you would usually want the OEs to be of different attributes. Still, 6 OEs is a very significant number. Lucina's Light Evo unfortunately doesn't work that well as a cleric, since her active skill does not handle unmatchables. You could run the unmatchable recovery Leighton, but honestly that doesn't have much value outside of very specific dungeons, because you're already running a cleric, and there are other low cooldown clerics out there that handle both unmatchable and awoken bind debuffs. She's not the worst cleric option out there, especially if you want a time buffer, but honestly, I would rather run some other option. Her light equip does have a lot of OEs and a TPA plus awakening, but the active skill cooldown is very short, so it'll be very easy to overcharge. Maybe this could save you a slot if you can get away with overcharging a unit to be your team cleric, but that's a very specific case, and you could just run a full cleric instead of relying on this equip. Lucina might be a decent exchange due to her water form and her equips, but like with Lajoa, I do think Lucina has limited uses and is overshadowed by other newer or recently buffed units. Lumiel is a new 7-star unit that has a fixed 4 active skill. Those are sometimes useful for ranking dungeons, but this one is not that fast due to the other effects in the active skill. Just in case she's ever useful, this would be one of the last units I would consider to be used as straight fodder. But if you don't manage to get her from your free rolls, I really don't think it's worth it to chase this card in the REM on the off chance that she will ever be useful for rankings. Her equip is one of the few ones with a T and a cross, but even though this combination is a little bit rare, I don't think there's any practical use for these. If you ever need the utility of a cross or the damage of a T, you could find other equips with more bulk, which generally has more value. Still, this equip does have 6 effective skill boosts, so it might not be too bad of an option if you want to condense this type of active skill with a cross or T awakening. Rex is also a new 7-star unit, and he has a low cooldown HP buffing active skill. This effect can be looped if you include 2 Rex in your team, but you will have to have a good way to heal, since at most, you will be at 50% HP every time you use his active skill. Rex also gives a spike, breaks his damage cap, and could generate some wood orbs, but these effects aren't as notable as the HP buff in my opinion. That more so goes for the orb generation effect, since it's a very unreliable way to get wood orbs on the board. One way to make this more reliable would be to include poison and jammer blessings in your team, but even after doing that, this is still not a sure way to be able to generate enough orbs, since you can still get very unlucky with Skyfall. Depending on your leader skill requirements, you might not have enough wood orbs on the resulting board to activate your leader skill. Rex Equip is a good source of damage. It also has a jammer blessing, which could be useful in a team with base New Year Rex, but again, the resulting board might not be the best. This equip is very easy to overcharge, and the 3x max HP buff can be very helpful to tank huge hits. But again, your team would have to have very high recovery or an auto healer to take advantage of this buff. Mashiro is a new orb skin unit, and she is a low cooldown rainbow board maker. Unfortunately, she has a bunch of weaknesses. She has a high transformation cooldown, offers no haste or delay effects on transformation, only generates 4 attributes on 5x4 boards, and drops you to 1 HP every turn that you use her active skill, which also doesn't remove locks. Unless you stack enough heal OEs and team RCBs or run an auto healer, that drop to 1 HP will be deadly, especially so in newer dungeons with thorns, super altitude, and type specific HP boosts, which effectively reduce your recovery. Mashiro has a high personal damage multiplier if you put a levitate equip on her, though she can really take full advantage of that since her active skill doesn't give a cap break effect. This isn't too big of a deal as it was beforehand, as Gung-Ho is releasing more and more units who break other units' damage caps. For example, you could use New Year Aiden in a Mashiro team. With 2 New Year Aidens, you can constantly loop the damage cap break effects. But at that point, Mashiro seems pretty useless since you'll have your orb generation covered. I guess if you are running Mashiro as a leader, you would want to use her active skill to guarantee 5 orbs of each attribute to take full advantage of her scaling leader skill. This leader skill doesn't give a lot of breathing room in 6x5 boards, especially so if you want to heal by matching heal orbs. Since 1, the leader skill doesn't boost recovery, and 2, if you want to match a heal TPA, then you'll have to undo some other 5 orb match and miss out on the leader skill's attack and combo boosts. Mashiro has one of the few 3 team HP anti-persist equips out there, and this one is the only one with the 7C, so if you value damage, this might be the better option. The active skill can be anywhere from 16 to 6 turn cooldown, so if you want to overcharge this equip, it might not be that hard if you max scale it. The damage void shield could be a lifesaver in some dungeons where you need to take a really big hit, but this effect is delayed, so this will require some careful planning. And if you're running a looping shield for example, the delayed effect will override that shield, so for 1 turn, you will have to take a hit without a shield. Overall, I think only her equip is somewhat valuable due to its bulk awakenings, but this alone isn't worth the $20 for the orb skin bundle or the chasing the REM. Enola is not a new unit, but she is pretty handy for farming purposes with her auto heal active skill. The base can be used alongside New Year Norris due to her attributes and Ls, but she is more commonly used in her equip form. A lot of times, you might only need her active skill once per dungeon, as it lasts for such a long time. And even though this can be easily voided by some enemies, these interruptions are a little bit rare. This equip was also used in some of the fastest JP teams for the Billion title, since these allowed you to not care about 5x4 boards with TIE teams. These are an issue whenever you use TIE's active skill, since on small boards, it doesn't generate any heals. Her active skill also has a very handy delay, so if the first few floors are delayable, you can get a lot of value. The equip also has great awakenings that add bulk, utility, and damage, so even if you were to disregard the entire active skill, this equip is still great overall. Chuan is an orb skin unit, and she is a looping shield and board expander. Her awakenings focus on damage, but this seasonal also has a different damage focus, light looping shield that is more accessible than this orb skin unit. Though if you value the board expansion, then this unit is a better choice. I don't think the combo orb generation from her active skill is all that important, but it could be useful for overcoming combo debuff. One example could be pre-transformation Cocrex in Alt UN6. In that dungeon, you must bring him down to super assault on the first turn, otherwise you will die. As a preemptive, he will give you a -5 combo debuff, so these corps could be useful there, as a lot of teams depend on 10C awakenings for damage, so +3 combos will help mitigate debuffs such as this. The annoying part will be to time these debuffs with Chuan's active skill. Her first equip has 7 effective skill boosts, which isn't bad, but Dragon equips have 8 effective skill boosts and are technically farmable. Chuan's equip does offer a bit more utility with the other awakenings, but these are still underwhelming overall. Her second equip is slightly better. Blind Resist and Damage Awakenings are an uncommon combination, but the active skill doesn't offer much of value, especially if you have someone like Goodnight Hello Kitty and Blackbird's equip, as those have better active skill that grant some effective skill boosts. I guess if you really care about the 7C awakenings, if your team is able to consistently make at least 14 combos, then you might already have Nergigante, Osiris, or Militia who were more accessible than this Orbskin unit. Because of all of this, I really don't think she's worth the $20. Ferule got a pretty interesting buff. She got a Levitate Awakening, a Their Attribute, and a 20 damage cap break for water units. Unfortunately, this 3-unit system does not have consistent orb generation. Well, she technically does if the enemy never disrupts your boards, but I feel that's a hard ask nowadays. And if you include another sub to close the orb generation loop, then your team will be a lot less flexible since you're gonna have 4 units dedicated to orb generation. Still, with proper planning, you can clear in-game dungeons like SN5. Chasing a full system of her is not something I would recommend for this run, seeing how she's a BGM unit that you need at least 2 copies of, so you will have to venture into the RAM even if you decide to spend $30 on 1 copy of her. And again, barely anything is worth pulling for in this seasonal. Ferule's equips have solid awakenings, but the active skills might not be that useful, and these are very easy to overcharge, though the Twin Dogs equip might be useful in teams that need an HP buff, and the easy overcharge there is more of a benefit. Still, I doubt that this very niche use is worth the $30 for the bundle, so even though I'm a big fan of her playstyle, I really would recommend skipping this BGM unit. Izanagi Izanami is an exchangeable and looping 40% shield. This unit requires 15 New Year units as straight fodder, but I would pass on this unit unless you have very concrete plans for them. They can fit into light combo teams, but right now in NA, there isn't one that is meta. This New Year unit could go in crowdly teams once the Gonho collab arrives, but once we have that collab, we'll have access to Stella, who is generally a better looping shield with more utility. Izanagi Izanami is more damage focused, but sometimes damage isn't the most important thing. I've seen a lot more teams using Stella over Izanagi Izanami, even though her shield is only 35% instead of 40% damage reduction. These New Year units equips aren't too impressive. The first adds a good amount of bulk and effective skill boost, but these awakenings do not seem like they're worth rolling 15 times in this seasonal. The equip's novelty is the 10 core or generation, but usually when you use an equip like this one, it's at the start of a dungeon where you might be stalling or facing off against weak enemies. So having 10 additional combos isn't going to be too consequential, and it actually might be a bit annoying since it'll be time consuming. The second equip is the second one with the light sub-attribute and levitate, and it's more accessible than the first one since that other one comes from a Gonho and Other Story BGM unit. This one does have a worse active skill, but if you're only interested in the awakenings, this is one of only 2 options. At the end of the day, I would rather save my stones and fodder since I don't think you'll get much use out of this unit and its equips. Menuit got a weird set of buffs with those dungeon boost awakenings on her base form. Still, if you put a levitate equip on her, she can deal a great amount of damage, though there probably isn't too much demand for a rebuffer like her in most meta teams. Even on transformation, she doesn't provide any effective skill boosts, so she won't be much help at the start of dungeons either. At least she now has a hard L sync awakening, so she can take the skill boost plus latent. She also has 2 Ls, and that means that she can also take the assist recovery latent, but honestly, with either latent, she doesn't seem like she'll bring much to the team, as I feel the standard for an assist recovery unit is at least 4 Ls. Her equips are the main highlight, both give bulk and a damage boost awakening. The first one might be more niche since it has a conditional damage awakening, and also the dungeon boost might be inconsequential in most dungeons. Omnimon could maybe use this, but there's better options that give more damage like the many 7C plus or 10C equips out there. The car equip is the third 3 team HP and 10C equip in the game, but the 100% damage reduction shield is basically 2 effective skill boosts. So if you have Amir's equip, then this one might see more of a downgrade since that one has a way lower cooldown and more effective skill boost if you can delay the first floor. These two equips are very solid, but I don't think they're worth $30, especially so if you have a deep box. Albrecht is the batch unit, so you can exchange him for 20 New Year units. You can create a system with 2 copies of this, so with these in a team, you get a looping shield effect along with orb generation every turn. Unfortunately, his active skill doesn't guarantee at least 9 wood orbs or a BDP match, which is one way you could go around playing him since he has a BDP plus Super Awakening. The active skill doesn't generate any heals, so if you want to go for BDPs and not include an auto healer, you'll have to run some other orb generator in the team. Another way to play him is as a wood TPA leader with one of the new Dragon GFEs we'll be seeing sometime soon in the next Dragon Jamboree event. With these units, you can run a Piercer unit and forget about matching BDPs, but you still have the heal orb generation problem. One unit that could solve this is Christmas Patty, who will also help heal for a lot with her high RCB and many heal OEs. This pairing is one of the better wood teams out there, but as usual with wood, that might not be saying much. If we end up getting GA Bunko, we'll have access to a much stronger and accessible wood team. So if you're a wood enjoyer, maybe save up stones for that team instead of rolling or exchanging for more than one Albrecht, but that does assume we'll get that collab. At best, I would exchange for 1 copy of this unit for their second equip, as that one will be great in SN5 since that dungeon boosts physical types. If we assume we won't get the weekly shonen collab, then this equip is somewhat comparable to Natus and Nicknell's, which is also a patch unit. Therefore, these two units have similar costs, but at least with Albrecht, we actually have access to him right now. Albrecht's first equip isn't too bad if you like wood teams, but in general, it might not be an attractive choice most of the time due to the wood sub-attribute. This equip is also nice to get enough orbs on the board to transform certain units. One example is TK, who needs 10 light orbs on the board, but another one is Ice, who needs the wood orbs. If you have enough exchange fodder for one Albrecht, I would consider getting one for his second equip if you care about tackling endgame as soon as it becomes available. But if you don't have the 20 units that you need as fodder, I would probably skip this exchange. Personally, I will be doing a few rolls in the 5 Magic Stone RAM so that I can get enough exchange fodder for Albrecht, since I would like to have access to his equip for SN5. But if you don't care about that dungeon, I understand if you feel you won't be getting much use out of this batch unit, since the base form is also not that appealing. Izanagi and Izanami is a cheaper trade, but I think that they are not too noteworthy. The looping shield is the second one in NA that reduces damage by 40%, so it's definitely rare in that sense, but they might not see much use. One notable light combo leader we'll see soon is Crowley from Gonho Collab, and they usually either use Stella or Ejisu as shield options. Though if you want to have more options for Crowley, maybe this newer unit is a better exchange than Albrecht. The BGMs Menuit and Ferule both have great equips, but I think $30 might be too high of a price for a lot of people. Menuit has 2 great equips, and these tend to age better than units, so if you do spend money in the game, maybe I could see the argument being made for her. Ferule has pretty decent equips, awakening-wise, but unlike Menuit's, these don't really have good active skills. When it comes to the base form, you will need multiple dupes to make her teams work, so I don't see the appeal of buying her bundle unless you really want to play with her and already have a copy or 2. Out of the units you can exchange for, I would say Lucina might have the most value due to her equips, but this trade is very pricey since she requires 7-star GFEs. Cammy and Aramis use 6-star GFEs as fodder, so they are cheaper, but if you don't farm with Shiba Dragon or New Year Norris, then I might skip these. Lumiel might see some use for ranking dungeons due to her active skill, so I would avoid trying to use her as straight fodder. Overall, I don't recommend rolling here, as not much of value can be obtained. If you do want to roll, I would only go into the 5 Magic Stone RAM with the expectation that everything will be used as straight fodder. If you get something useful, then great, but I would try to save up stones for future event. This seasonal lasts until February 2nd, so if you do plan to roll, do it closer to that date as we might have some news about possible collabs by then. Maybe there's still a chance for JJK, but honestly, this is looking to be more and more unlikely. Disney also seems very unlikely, but if we do happen to get a run or a reskin, I would rather roll there for Aurora since she's great due to her cleric and looping shield active skill. The Gung-Ho collab has useful units like Stella, who is a BGM, so if you only care about her, you could just purchase her. If you don't spend any money in the game, then I would try to save up magic stones to roll in that RAM. Weekly Shonen seems unlikely as we have missed previous runs, but I don't think it will be a big deal if we miss it. This collab has somewhat competent leaders for SN5, but what I've noticed that has lasted a bit more is the batch units equipped, which is very similar to newer Albrechts. So if you get an Albrecht, then maybe there's not much reason to save up in case that collab comes to NA. GA Bunko is a new IP, so we have no clue if it'll come to NA. This collab has two meta teams. One of them is very well, and the other one is somewhat accessible. The typical Bell team uses dupes of the batch and BGM units, so that team is pretty pricey, and if you're hopeful that it'll come to an A, you might want to save up since you might have to do a lot of rolls to get enough fodder for the batch unit, and at least one copy of the BGM. The Ice team is a bit more accessible since you can exchange GFEs for her, but you will still need some of the mid rarities to complete her teams. Therefore, you might want to save up magic stones for GA Bunko if you're interested in those two teams. The current event going on in JP is Heroines, but this in-house RAM is a bit of a disappointment since a lot of the units, even after being buffed, are very weak and feel outdated. Unless you really want the new units, I really don't see much reason to save up for this RAM. It's been barely 2 months since the Gung-Ho collab ran in JP, and they have just announced that they'll have a rerun already. We don't have the full details yet, but this quick turnaround might mean we won't see any meaningful buffs to the units that were released on the last run. I'm expecting this rerun to be somewhat underwhelming, but by the time we see our NA rerun, we'll hopefully know all the details. Maybe the best move will be to skip our next run and save up for the next one. Maybe not, because the RAM pool might get too crowded for the latest run. At least, we should have the hindsight in NA. There are other RAMs that should be coming up soon in JP, Valentines, Butlers and Maids, and maybe some other third-party collab that Gung-Ho might announce for JP's anniversary next month. So even assuming that we won't be getting some of the third-party collabs like JJK and GA Bunko, I think the best course of action is to keep saving stones, mainly for the Gung-Ho collab. The New Year seasonal at best has a couple of units that are useful, so I would recommend to either do no to minimal rolling in this seasonal. What are your plans? Like I said, I'll only be rolling a few times to get enough fodder for Albrecht, since I would like to have access to his equip for SN5. I guess most people, me included, won't have enough fodder for both him and Izanagi and Izanami. Do any of you think that the latter unit has more value than Albrecht? I really don't think so, but let me know what you think in the comments below, and like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Also, please remember to vote for your favorite pad related stuff. I will hopefully release that video soon enough. Thank you all for watching, and special thanks go out to Aegis number 1 and Awkward Panda, Breastfeeding Obama, Dark Silencers, Hella Derpy, and Nightcore94 for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. Alright, I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.